Poland's Love is Blind is a complete mess. I to jest mój pierwszy raz oglądać Love is Blind. Chciałem uczyć się polskiego. And I can't get enough of it. Alright, so I want to talk about some of the couples now. By far, my favorite girl in the whole show is Marta. I think she is the most down to earth. She has a very troubled past, but I think because of that, she's very mature. She seemed to have like a deeper connection with MP, the bald guy who was speaking English. He seemed to be a lot more serious. And I wonder if him and Marta would have had enough like personality polarity to work out in the long term. I think Damien is an interesting character. He's like the perfect example of the Polish man who cannot take things seriously and still in kind of his boyish mentality. He's physically very attractive. I can understand his charm and how he has to make jokes about everything. But I think there is a time and place for it. And there are certain moments in the show where, you know, Marta is feeling sad or she's serious or she's clearly feeling stressed, like when they went to go skydiving. And instead of him trying to comfort her, he was just making jokes all the time. I think that this relationship is probably the realest out of all of them. Talk about Daria and Filip. Okay, so no offense to Daria. I just don't find her particularly physically attractive. I think she's very masculine, even though I think she has very beautiful eyes. I don't know why this girl is like wearing a thong in all of the freaking like reunions and all these shows. Like, girl, because you know when she and Filip, they met for the first time, he was like all over her and he was grabbing her butt and stuff, right? May not be appropriate, but also by the way that she carries herself and how she dresses, it kind of makes sense that that happened. Like that she's confrontational and she doesn't put up with BS. I like how she took like a big sister role to Julia. Because she's older, she's a lot more mature. Filip is interesting because in that relationship dynamic, he comes off as a more feminine one. The fact that he's a younger man with an older woman is going to cause issues in the long term, because if you guys didn't know, like my ex-wife was 7 years older than me. The big issue with that dynamic is that I think it's hard for a woman who's older than a man to respect a man in the same way than if the man was older, if that makes sense. And I think respect is very important in a relationship. It's how a man can feel like powerful and useful and respected. It's how a woman can feel safe. If the woman can trust that the man can handle things when things get rough or there's high pressure situations, she can relax a little bit. But I think Daria is just naturally a more masculine person anyway, so she may bring out the feminine side of Filip. He also seems to have a lot of doubts regarding the marriage because of how fast it went, and also he was traveling and working a lot, so he didn't get to spend a lot of time with his girl. Where he's coming from makes sense because he shared that his parents split up, and that's a fear that he has. And because I got divorced already, I overthink all of my relationships because I don't want to get divorced again if I were to get married again. So I can understand why he's like has so many doubts, but I also think that he's not really into the relationship. The fact that he's with an older woman, I think he's gonna regret in the long term. Sounds messed up to say, but that's the truth. Men, we behave differently when we're with a younger woman that we think is more beautiful and more attractive than we are. All right, so Malika and Krzysztof. This relationship was just a mess from the beginning. Even from the dating stages in the pod, I knew that they didn't really like each other like that. And this girl is just so controlling. But if you understand why she's that way, it's because in the last relationship, she said that she was cheated on too. So I think because of that, that's why she's so controlling now. I don't really blame her for that. But I've been around women who are like that, and they are just so unbearable sometimes. Like every little thing that you do is wrong. You always have to do it her way. And if you don't do it her way, she throws a fit. It's extremely bossy. This reminds me of a lot of Asian women that I know who are super particular and almost like authoritarian. But I also thought Krzysztof was very cowardly in his behavior. You know, he really couldn't make a decision between Malika or Kinga. Still ended up like cheating on Malika and getting with Kinga while they were still together when he should have just broke it off to begin with. And when Kinga rejected him, then he went back to Malika with flowers and everything. All of it was just like bitch behavior, to be honest. And I think they just kind of really did it so they can get on the show for longer, but I was never really confident about that from the beginning. Julia and Kamil Uno was the couple that surprised me the most. When I first met Julia, I thought that she was very strong and a little bit bossy, or kind of like she has this diva energy, you know? And I thought Kamil Uno was very, I don't know if weak is the right word, but he was just very soft-spoken. But the more that I see the relationship dynamic and the more I understand both of them, the more I like them a lot. You know, the whole drama with the chocolate thing I thought was like a silly thing. And Julia has this problem where like sometimes she'll get angry at like small things. She just kind of shut down and just get this attitude where Camille is like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And I feel like it's quite emotionally manipulative from her part. But then once you saw her family dynamic and you saw how demanding and crazy her mom was, you should see how domineering the mom was with asking all these questions, which you know, I can kind of understand, but it just seemed a little bit too extreme. So it makes sense why Julia acts the way that she does and why she shuts down after certain comments, because growing up with a mom like that, if the mom would just make a bunch of comments, her response was probably just to shut down and to not say anything. When they went to go see the wedding dresses, the mom wasn't there for that. I thought it was really messed up. She looks really beautiful without makeup. I was really surprised. She actually looks better without makeup than with makeup. And Kamil Uno, we got to see a lot more about his family life, and then when they showed his life in Norway, he has a beautiful home. He has a good family life there, you know, with his siblings. It makes sense that he wants to kind of set up his life there. It's very peaceful. That guy's the man, you know. He's very soft-spoken, but he's successful. He has stuff together. I'm actually quite optimistic for this relationship because I think they complement each other really well in their energy. Because of the distance, I wonder if they're going to be able to make that work. The last couple is Julita and Jacek. She is so hot for her age. She's a Polish MILF for sure. You can tell that she's been through a lot of hardship. I think her last husband, if I'm not mistaken, also offed himself. I thought they did her dirty by planning the wedding on the 3-year anniversary or something of him like dying. I thought that was so messed up. There is something about women as they get older, especially if they're like almost approaching 40 and they've been through a lot, where they seem to have this like bitterness about them. And I noticed that she's kind of like that in the relationship. I think actually Jacek is a cool guy. He's the most memeable guy in the whole entire show. You know, during the reveal, he was just like, ooh. Ow. But they seem to have like a really good adult relationship. And because they're around the same age, and I think Julita is older than him, when he met the son, it was a really interesting dynamic, and her son totally looks like Pete Davidson. But I respect that he seems to have a very calm energy. I think he has the best balance of everything. He seems to be mature. He can joke around when needed, but he can also be serious when needed. I'm just curious to see if they're going to make it in the long term. I thought it was funny that Jacek and Julita, Filip and Daria, they kind of liked each other, but the more attractive couple ended up getting together, and the two less attractive people ended up getting together. And I know that Filip, when he saw Julita, was pissed. I don't mean to sound rude, and I know girls are not gonna like this comment. I wish that they picked prettier girls. Poland has like some of the most beautiful women in the world. The people that they picked for the show are like such a poor representation of the women here. I'm gonna say that it's shallow, but może być, że miłość się ślepa, ale nie jestem, okay? So, but I think that the men that they picked were actually physically quite attractive. I know a lot of Westerners may think that it's a little bit too direct, or they're kind of shocked at the honesty. And that's actually one of the things that I like the most about this country. In Slavic countries in general, right? They have this like no BS attitude to life and to relationships. It's not really in the culture here to be super flashy and to want to go on TV. A lot of the people I met, especially if they come from the smaller towns, don't really like attention. The majority of people do come from two-parent households. Surprising amount of like trauma with the people in this show. Polish people have been through a lot, and I think the women absorb it the most. Okay, so here are some of the biggest things that I've noticed about Poland. The women tend to have a lot more of stronger energy and more serious energy, whereas the boys tend to be a lot more boyish and kind of messing around. They seem to struggle with really taking leadership role, and the women often have to do it. I'm trying to figure out where the origin of this is. It's not as simple to just say it's women's fault for being extremely overbearing, or it's the men's fault for being extremely lazy. My theory, in countries around the world where the women are so attractive and they have so much competition that the women have to work to get an eligible man, you kind of have this dynamic. And that's why this dynamic also exists in Latin America, because there are so many beautiful women. Trying to find a good man who can provide and is loyal and faithful and all these things is a lot more rare. Whereas in America, it's flipped, where because everybody's obese and the women's are extremely entitled and the attitude is crazy, they're also kind of whores, if I'm being honest. Trying to find a good eligible wife is a lot harder, so the men have to work a lot harder to get the attention of the women. Does that make sense? In no country it will ever be 50-50. One gender is always going to be more competitive than the other. I think that Polish women specifically have this generational trauma of anxiety. So because of that, they feel the need to control everything. So that's why they're sometimes very overbearing and have this tendency to mom their boyfriend. If the boyfriend doesn't have enough courage and backbone to be able to stand up, he doesn't have that respect from that woman, the relationship will usually turn into her leading everything and the man trying trying to avoid conflict with the woman, or he just kind of lets her be. You can even see that in the show with how Julia's mom acts. Every Polish family has some form of these two archetypes, where the mom, who is extremely domineering and controlling, babies the boys while putting a lot of pressure on the women, and the men who either just focus on work all the time, so we're not there emotionally, or are alcoholics. A lot of the fathers seem to have a problem with masculine correction, especially for the women. You can tell, especially in this new generation, where a lot of the boys have baby faces and a lot of the women have harder faces, almost like they've been through a lot more. And you can even tell in the host of the show of Love is Blind, right? Like the man is tall, beard, very pretty guy. You can kind of tell who runs that relationship. It's the woman, not the man. And the guy is just kind of eye candy. This is a similar dynamic that also exists in Korea, and they both have struggling birth rates. Poland, they have a big problem with the boys being mama's boys, which is what causes them to be, very hesitant, not good at leading, not decisive, because they're not being raised by their dads, they're being raised by their moms. Polish women usually care more about romance than the success and the money of a man. The Ukrainian women, they get a reputation for being like gold diggers because they look for more finance and status of a man. And I don't think either is wrong or right? It's just big cultural differences. The success and the provision of a man is actually very important because it says a lot of things about the man. But then in Poland, when you have the girls who want the romance and the guys to be emotional support, that's cool, but it leads to the problem where the women will often be a lot more ambitious than the man and have to mom the man and nag the man to make more money, whereas the man is perfectly happy where he is. He doesn't need to be ambitious because he already has the beautiful woman and she's having sex with him. I'm not trying to make a judgment whether it's good or bad. I'm just simply observing as a foreigner. I would say that Polish people are also very emotionally intense. I think Polish women have the same emotional range as like Latinas. However, because they're a little bit more intelligent here and also because of the winters, they're a little bit more reasonable, I think. People have said that Polish people are just like snow Latinos, and I actually highly agree with that. A lot of the men here are really good around the house. They come from a large construction background. When Polish people immigrate into other countries, they're usually doing construction work. Now recently, it's a lot more like IT stuff, and it's a Catholic country. Mexicans are very similar like that too. There was a lot of PDA in the show. You'll notice that they're often holding hands and they're kissing and they're always like on each other. That I think is because Slavic people in general, like if you look at Russian is a very vulgar language and quite an emotionally deep language. I would say Polish is even deeper. Polish is like has the precision of German, emotional expression of a language like Spanish. So that means that the people here love with all of their heart. People think that Slavic culture is very cold, which is true if you guys are strangers. Once you guys are in a relationship, people here are actually very sexual. I think Slavic people have very high sexual drives. It's quite interesting seeing how openly they talk about sex, especially the women. They want it just as much as the men, and they talk about all of the details. It's totally acceptable to talk about sex like that if you are in a committed relationship. Women here are not really promiscuous like that. Some are, but the vast majority are not. Whereas in Latin America, you'll be walking around and the women will be showing a lot of stuff. Here, it's more like the women won't show everything, but they'll wear like a skin-tight dress without a bra. So you can still kind of see everything, but there's still like a little bit classy layer on it. And I also thought it was funny that the episode with the bachelor and bachelorette parties, the women were in the limo and they were partying and they went to the club with the strippers, whereas the men were just chilling, doing paintball and like a bonfire amongst themselves, If you guys like this style of video and you want to be a part of this video, shoot me a message on Instagram, because I would love to make this into a series and I would love to bring in other people like subscribers or some of my friends so I can get other people's opinions on the show. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace out.